importers of taking their prisoners, right? And hate to say it, the way they execute them, and then they make sure they execute them in such a way that they can sell body parts. So, I mean, and they do all over the world. And, it just, I think our future is going to be where, that's some ways it's going to maybe cure cancer, cure all kinds of diseases or other things. And I think, I guess it's up to each person in their own mind how they feel, and
right.
And who knows what the future is going to be like anyway.
Right. Well, and here's some food for thought, or just something to really consider. So the scientist is, I'm going to really butcher his name here, but his name was He Jiankui. That's my best way of pronouncing that. But he, the news story, and this was on CNN, like basically all over the web. It was about three and a half weeks ago, at the end of November, and he announced to the world that he had created the first genetically edited twins. And his whole purpose for doing this, and I was doing some reading up on it, was he wanted to allow somebody who had HIV, and they talked about how people with HIV in China were really ostracized and really, thought of, very poorly. And he was trying to do something that would allow them to actually have children and not have those children contract the AIDS virus. And so he genetically edited these twins in such a way that they supposedly, and they haven't just proven anything yet, but that they supposedly were going to be HIV immune. And when he announced this, governments all over the world basically came out immediately and condemned his work. And I'll get in a little bit as to why in just a second. And so they all condemned his work. And then I think it was like a day and a half later, like you were talking about, he literally disappeared. And I was, looking up stuff on online. They even talk about, people, presupposing or coming to the conclusion that it was the Chinese government that, quote, disappeared him, kind of like what you were talking about. And it's a fine balance, I think, that we are looking to walk as really a people, as humankind, in trying to determine, using science for the betterment of quality of life and curing diseases, and I'm all for that. But there's this line, and that line in the sand kind of varies on the person and their own opinions, and really where they feel it justifiably lands is if you do make these modifications genetically, there is a major risk, and that risk is what happens if you somehow alter, deform, or do unanticipated things to other genes in that person or in that form. And then when that person is now a person walking around, they're an adult, and let's say they have children, what does that potentially introduce into the genetic pool of all humankind?
It could. It could be chaos, too. I mean, major chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you go like one route. Well, you could completely, could humankind become sterilized? There's been lots of scientific, movies and books about that type of an angle. Is it something where there would be some type of, you talk about curing cancer? Maybe it creates something which is even worse than cancer, and that gets contracted, and there's no cure for it. Period. So there's such a high risk to it. And that's where most of the governments came out and why they condemned it, because it really is, how would you, I mean, I was looking up this one quote, and there's this guy, his name's Francis Collins, and he's the health director of, actually, he's in the United States, he's the National Institute Health Director, and he called the experiment, and I'm going to quote this where he said, a drastic, regrettable step, and an epic misadventure of science. It's everybody sees it as potentially very detrimental, and they just felt that he was really foolhardy going after trying to accomplish this.
Well, I think it is. Remember the sheep back years ago that they cloned. It had all kinds of problems, and it did not really live very long. Yeah, I mean, they did clone it, and you don't know what you can create, and that's the scary part. You don't even know, even on the first, second, or third generation, it could alter something. and change everything.
Yeah, this guy, this Chinese scientist, they've actually come to refer to him as the Chinese Frankenstein now.
Yeah, and I got a funny feeling he's locked up in a cell somewhere right now.
Maybe, or a box.
or somewhere else. I mean, China is totally different when it comes to how they administer, their laws and their thoughts and their beliefs. And this is one thing. I mean, when I heard that on the news, I was in total shock because I figured, boy, this guy's going to disappear.
Yeah, and if they see anything that's potentially detrimental to, quote, the party, that they basically can do whatever they need to protect that image.
Oh, yeah. So you have this book out, and it's available, on Amazon?
Yeah, so it's available on Amazon in both digital and paperback, and then it's also available on barnesandnoble.com in paperback and hardcover.
Well, Alan, how long has it been out on the street?
So I self-published in March of this year, so it's been almost 9 months, and it's actually been, this is my first book that I've published, and I haven't had a whole lot of experience in the, publishing world before. But people that I talk with have told me that, the sales volume, the results that I'm getting are actually really, really good for a self-published author. And, and I have nothing to compare it to. Of course, I'm like, well, I wish it was in the tens of thousands. I wish it was, these massive numbers, but that's just not going to happen overnight, especially, for an individual who's just, not known. They just, no one knows who I am and knows any of my work.
Yeah, that's one thing. You have a lot of courage to, self-publish, because I have a friend that's already published quite a few books, and they found out it takes a lot of work to market it. And, then I've had other, guests on the show who publish books, and I hate to say it, I had one guy on that wrote a book, and during, he really hyped up his book, brought him on the air, found out in a year's time he hasn't sold one book. So, I mean, wow. That's some of the pitfalls when you publish your own book, but it sounds like your book is doing good. I think it's maybe the subject matter.
I think it's the subject matter, and then something else which I think is definitely in my favor. So a lot of authors I've talked to, and definitely like ones I've seen at shows and things like that, so for a lot of other authors, the hard part for them isn't writing the book. The hard part for them is in marketing the book and, getting out there and talking about it. And for me, in my professional career, I did work for 25 years doing digital marketing and advertising. And so I am very comfortable, talking to larger groups, and and I know what it takes to successfully market a book. Of course, the other challenge is having the money to successfully promote that book. So I get to bootstrap a lot of things. But I think that has definitely helped in the success of my book. So when I go out and I do sales events and things like that, I'm able to, capture people's attention and their interest and get them to kind of make that decision to purchase a book. And, a great example, so here in eastern Idaho, it's a local grocery chain called Brolem's. And they are, it's really, it's a high-quality grocery chain in eastern Idaho. They probably have, I think, like maybe 11 locations or 12, and that's it. And I was at an event last weekend where I sold in their store on a Friday and a Saturday, and in the 2 days, I sold 75 books.
That is not bad. That's that's crazy, good. Right? That's good.
And and considering that people, when people come to the store, they're not coming into the grocery stores. Oh, I'm gonna meet an author and buy a book. They're going, I'm going to get my jalapeno peppers. I'm going to get my Campbell's noodle soup, whatever it might be. And so I'm catching the door, and so I've got maybe 60 seconds to kind of capture their attention. And so that's been doing really well. And the other thing, which is also for me is kind of indicative that it's been doing well so far, is literally just yesterday. So for me, one of the big goals is not just to be in barnesandnoble.com, but I want to be able to have my book in the Barnes & Noble physical stores. And they do have requirements, though, like in terms of sales volume and things like that, to be considered. And yesterday, I actually had a conversation with the store manager of a Barnes & Noble here close to where I live in Idaho Falls. And I'm getting set up to actually do a book signing in January at the Barnes & Noble store. So that's
great.
like major milestone. Yeah.
That is. I mean, all the work, good thing you know about marketing. That makes a big difference. But
Helps a lot.
getting into your subject matter, I can see where, let's say you have cancer, you have some type of disease, would you, really consider to, give up your genes to be cloned? I would think a lot of people, seriously, if it was available, they would think nothing of it and do it. Because I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble with the people out there, but I don't know when life really exists. Does it happen on the Big Bang, or does it happen, a month down the road, or a week down the road, or whatever?
Right.
When is it considered a human? And that's where I guess maybe the courts down when they probably have. Determine when that is. But, from the standpoint, like I was mentioning, when I was talking to that CEO, where they're cloning fingers and toes and trying to do hands and other, legs and stuff like that. And they, have actually managed to clone fingers and toes at this point. It just, it shocks me. Now, is that immoral too? If they're taking your genes and cloning your finger, is that a life or is that just a hunk of meat? I don't know.
Go down to the butcher, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I think about it, and I've definitely thought about this a lot. It kind of comes down to, if it's a life form, and this is where we're kind of drawing that line in differentiating when does life begin. Why it's such a tough question. If you say, it's 3 months after a baby is formed, and it's like 3 months before the in terms of how long the baby's formed for, and so if you decide okay, that there's not a life form yet, and then we're going to go ahead and destroy that form, then it's like, well, then we're basically saying that our decision to end that life is more important or takes credence over that thing or that life form, however you view it, and their right to live. And I think the difference between fingers or toes and organs and things like that is those wouldn't have the fingers and toes, and that wouldn't have any ability to actually become some type of a sentient thinking life, whereas an embryo has that potential.
Yeah, but you just said the magic word, has the potential. It doesn't at 18 hours. Right.
So. Right. And that is the opinion of many people, that, it has the potential to become that. But then the counter argument for that becomes, well, then, what gives, an individual or whomever the ability to say, I'm going to take away the right of that potential to develop. And I think that's what makes it such a sticky wicket.
Well, now I'm going to really get people mad at me. How about the people going into the clinic and get an abortion?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, now we're
my book doesn't go into that subject at all.
I know, but they're ending life, and look how far along it is. So what you're just doing is basically, talking about genes when it just forms the spark of life at that point. Mm-hmm. And that's so. I don't know. It is such a real hard decision, to make. But I honestly think you hit a subject that's really hot, and I got a funny feeling down the road, the way people, and scientists, and how the community works. I got a funny feeling it might be something that's going to probably happen down the road.
Oh, I absolutely. I'm like 100% confident that this is going to happen. The science, that the year of research we did on the front end of it back in 2010, 2011, the science behind this, it's like genomic imprinting, and that's literally how you turn on certain traits, turn off different traits, and you literally take an embryonic clone, and you can basically form that into a specific genetic structure. That is the same type of science that Chinese scientists applied just at a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
He did it to mock.